In an age where every sound demands your attention and every fear whispers your name, one truth has been forgotten. A warrior is not forged in battle, but in the silence before the battle begins. This is the story of a man who carried storms inside his chest, a man who ran from fear until fear learned to run after him, a man who believed strength meant ocean, until an ancient master showed him the hidden path, the path of stillness, deep in the mist-wrapped mountains of old Japan, where bamboo bends but never breaks. A wandering apprentice arrived taking power, but the master who awaited him carried no sword, only eyes that had seen the shape of fear and hands steady with the weight of 1,000 dawns. "Sit," the master said. "No movement, no escape, no lies, only your spirit and the truth you hide from." And in that stillness, the apprentice would learn that fear is not an enemy, but a mirror. This is the journey of transformation, egos unraveling, and the quiet resurrection of a fearless mind. Welcome to the ancient art of unshakable stillness. Chapter 1: The Man Who Could Not Breathe. Part 1. The village slept beneath a blanket of mist, yet Hiroto felt no comfort. His body was restless, but it was his mind that refused peace. He swung his sword with precision, faster, harder, as if motion could expel the invisible weight pressing against his chest. Every strike met its mark, every form executed with flawless technique. But inside, a tightening coiled like a serpent, suffocating him from within. Breath came in shallow gasps, even when the day's training had ended. He could not name this fear, yet its presence was undeniable. A shadow trailing him, a quiet predator watching, waiting for a misstep. At night, Hiroto's bed became a cage. He tossed, turned, and clutched the thin covers as if they could hold the tempest at bay. Images of failure, the tests he had barely passed, the mocking eyes of the village elders, the whispered doubts of his peers, swirled in a relentless storm. His body craved rest. His mind rejected it. He had been told that courage was forged through action, through strength, through proving oneself. But Hiroto felt that courage slipping like sand between his fingers. The harder he tried to grasp it, the faster it fled. One morning, the dojo called him to a trial of courage. His peers lined the wooden floor, their eyes expectant, their whispers like the buzz of insects. Hiroto knelt at the center, his hands trembling despite his effort to steady them. The master's gaze bore into him, not harsh, but unflinching, and Hiroto's heart thumped so loudly he feared it would betray him. When the signal came, he moved, but not with the precision he was known for. Panic fled like wildfire. His limbs froze, his breath hitched and caught in his throat. Sweat coated his skin, and the world narrowed to a pinprick of light. He could not breathe, could not move, could not summon the power that had once defined him. The silence of his paralysis was deafening. Humiliation rose, choking, as the whispers of the crowd seeped into his mind. Coward, weak, unworthy Hiroto fled the dojo, not out of shame for failing the test, but because failure had revealed a truth he could not face alone. Strength, he realized, was not measured in speed or skill. Something deeper, something unseen was missing. The path he had walked, striving endlessly to outpace fear, had led him into its cage. He needed guidance, but not the kind he had sought before. He needed someone who could teach him not how to fight fear, but how to breathe beneath it. Weeks later, he found himself in the mist-shrouded mountains, guided only by fragments of rumors and the intuition that had long whispered beneath his restlessness. The path twisted and crumbled beneath his sandals. Stones slick with moss tested his every step. The air grew thinner, colder, carrying the scent of pine and the distant tang of stone. At the edge of a narrow plateau, Hiroto came upon a temple carved into the cliffside, its weathered wood and faded gold faintly visible through the fog. And there, standing with a posture so calm it seemed to absorb the mountain itself, was Ryokan. The master was old, but his presence carried the weight of lifetimes. His eyes were sharp, yet patient, steady, like the river that cuts stone slowly but inevitably. His hands rested lightly at his sides, empty, unadorned, unthreatening. There was no sword, no armor, no challenge laid before Hiroto, only silence and an invitation. Ryokan looked at Hiroto and saw everything. The racing mind, the clenching chest, the unspoken shame. He did not speak immediately, allowing the mountain's wind to fill the space, to press against Hiroto's frayed nerves. Then, in a voice neither loud nor soft, he said simply, "Sit. Before you conquer fear, you must learn how to breathe again." Hiroto stared, uncertain. How could such a frail command carry the weight of all he had sought? But even as doubt coiled in his mind, he obeyed. He sat on the cold stone floor, legs crossed, spine stiff, eyes forward. The wind swept past, carrying the scent of pine and earth, and for the first time in years, Hiroto felt the tremor in his chest match the rhythm of the world. Breath, in, out, in, out. The act was simple, but the simplicity belied the struggle. Every inhale and exhale was a confrontation with the chaos inside him. Minutes passed like hours. Each breath was a mountain to climb, a storm to weather. Hiroto realized that in all his training, in all his attempts to master the blade and himself, he had ignored the foundation of courage, the steady, deliberate presence of the body and mind in unison. The storm within did not dissipate immediately. It did not vanish with effort or willpower. But with each conscious breath, Hiroto discovered a fissure in the fear that had held him captive, a sliver of space where he could begin to see himself, unmasked and unafraid. And so, beneath the shadowed peaks, Hiroto learned the first, most vital truth. Mastery of the self begins not in motion, not in conquest, but in stillness. The mountain does not move for you, Hiroto. First, you must learn to stand still. Chapter 1, Part 2. Hiroto's breaths became a quiet drum, marking time in the cold silence. Each inhale teased his panic. Each exhale challenged the tightening cage within his chest. The mountain wind whispered through the pines, carrying with it the memory of every failure, every shameful glance he had endured in the village. Yet, in the presence of Ryokan, these memories no longer held power. They were observed, not consumed. The old master's gaze was a mirror reflecting Hiroto's turmoil without judgment, and for the first time, the young warrior understood a subtle truth. Courage was not the absence of fear. It was the willingness to sit with it, undistracted and unafraid. Hours bled into the misty afternoon. Hiroto's body ached, his muscles stiff from unnatural stillness, yet his mind began to shift. The frantic heartbeat, the paralyzing grip of shame began to soften. With each breath, he felt a thread of clarity weaving through the chaos. Fear was no longer a faceless enemy. It was a companion, relentless but honest. It spoke in tremors and tightness, in the quiver of a hand or the catch of a throat. And Hiroto listened. Ryokan finally broke the silence, his voice gentle, measured. The body knows what the mind refuses. Your breath is the bridge. Fear is not a wall. It is a mirror. It reflects the cracks you hide, the truths you deny. To conquer it, first you must meet it. Without breath, there is no meeting. Without stillness, there is no sight. Hiroto exhaled, letting the weight of years slip slightly from his shoulders. The sensation was unfamiliar and frightening. He had spent a lifetime moving, striving, attacking the void outside himself. Yet it was the quiet, motionless moments here, between breaths, that carved a space for understanding movement, he realized, would always be easier than stillness. Yet the sword he had carried in training, the speed and strength he had honed for years, would mean nothing if he could not stand firm within himself. As twilight fell, the mist thickened around the temple. Shadows deepened in the crevices of the rocks, and the air grew heavier with cold and silence. Hiroto remained seated, feeling each inhalation stretch his chest, each exhalation release tension from his shoulders. For the first time, he sensed not just the fear within, but also the dormant potential lying beneath it, a reservoir of presence, patience, and quiet power, waiting for acknowledgement. Ryokan watched, knowing the seed had been planted. The first lesson had begun to take root. Hiroto would rise from this moment changed, though the change was subtle, imperceptible to the eye. The rest of the world, the village, the battles, and the tests, all would still demand mastery. But now, he possessed something they could not take. The ability to meet fear without flinching, to breathe when the chest tightened, to remain grounded while chaos raged. As the night deepened and the mist swallowed the temple in its embrace, Ryokan placed a hand lightly on Hiroto's shoulder. "Rest now," he said. "Tomorrow, the mountain will teach you what breath alone cannot. But for tonight, you have begun to remember the body you abandoned, the mind you refused to still, the spirit you must reclaim." Hiroto closed his eyes, feeling the steady rhythm of his own breathing, the first glimmer of unshakable stillness stirring in the depths of his chest. The journey had begun, not with swords or strikes, but with the silent, unassuming act of simply sitting. And in the dawn to come, the mountain would demand more than breath. It would demand presence. Chapter 2. The Mountain of Echoes. Part 1. The morning air carried a crystalline sharpness as Hiroto stepped onto the stone path that wound its way through the ancient mountains. Each footfall struck the moss-covered stones with a measured thud, yet the sound seemed swallowed by the vastness around him. Mist clung to the cliffs like memory, obscuring depth and distance, and the wind whispered with a voice both gentle and cruel. It was a place that had witnessed centuries of warriors, each seeking mastery, each confronting the same inner storms Hiroto now carried. Ryokan walked ahead, his steps deliberate and unhurried, yet imbued with a certainty that made the mountains themselves seem to yield. He said nothing, allowing Hiroto's mind to fill the silence with its usual restlessness. Doubts, fears, imagined failures. The young warrior realized quickly that here the mountain did not merely serve as backdrop. It was a teacher, a mirror, an unblinking eye. The cliffs, jagged and unyielding, reflected the rigid tension in Hiroto's body. The wind, harsh and biting, mirrored the chaos inside his mind. The river below roared unseen, like the pulse of life itself, relentless, uncaring, unbroken. After hours of ascent, Ryuken brought Hiroto to the edge of a vast cliff. The wind battered him from every side, tearing at the sleeves of his robe, lifting his hair into a wild crown. The drop beneath stretched endlessly, shrouded in fog, and for a moment, Hiroto felt the familiar surge of panic. His heart quickened, his limbs sagged for motion. The old master placed a firm hand on his shoulder, yet did not speak. Instead, he gestured toward the void. "Stand," Ryuken said simply. "Do not move, do not speak, do not think of moving. Stand." Hiroto obeyed, knees trembling, muscles quivering as the mountain tested every ounce of his resolve. At first, he focused on the wind, imagining it as an opponent to outmatch with brute force, with speed, with motion. But the gusts were indifferent, unstoppable. They did not yield. And then his mind began its assault. Memories of failure, shame from the dojo, the mocking stares of those who had once called him brave. Every image, every sound intensified in the isolation of the cliff. His legs shook, his chest rose and fell with ragged breaths, and the urge to flee became almost unbearable. Hours passed. Time blurred into a strange, formless haze. Hiroto's mind, starved of distraction, began to fracture under its own relentless narrative. He imagined himself tumbling from the cliff, imagined the crowd laughing at his failure, imagined fear itself swallowing him whole. Each inhale was a fight, each exhale a surrender he refused to grant. And yet, amid the storm of his thoughts, a tiny, almost imperceptible thread began to form, a whisper that perhaps resistance was not the answer, perhaps stillness itself could be the weapon, the shield, and the teacher. Ryokan remained silent, his presence steady as stone. The young warrior realized the lesson was not in conquering the wind, nor in outlasting the cold, nor even in surviving the hours of torment. The lesson was in witnessing, observing the fear without yielding to it, naming it without cowering, feeling it without reacting. It was a confrontation with himself, unmediated by swords, by village accolades, by action. The mountain demanded nothing but presence. When Hiroto's legs began to buckle, Ryokan's voice cut through the roar. Stillness is not the absence of fear. It is the discipline of meeting it without running. Those words, simple yet profound, struck deeper than any strike of a blade. In the echoing wind and the unyielding cliff, Hiroto glimpsed the first true reflection of the warrior path, not in external triumph, but in the mastery of his own inner landscape. He sank to one knee, breath ragged, but a strange calm began to settle in his chest. The mountain's roar no longer mocked him. It became a rhythm to which his heart could attune. The wind carried not just struggle, but clarity. Fear had not vanished. It had simply been met. And for the first time, Hiroto sensed that his journey was not about running from what haunted him, but learning to stand firm while it roared around him. The mountain does not bend, neither does fear. Only those who learn to stand still can glimpse what lies beyond. Chapter 2, Part 2. Hiroto remained on the cliff as the sun dipped behind jagged peaks, painting the mist in bruised purples and molten gold. Each breath had become deliberate, a dialogue between body and mind. The trembling that had seized him hours before now softened into a rhythm he could ride, a quiet awareness that every gust of wind, every shriek of stone and pine was part of the lesson. The mountain did not rush, and neither could he. It demanded patience, presence, and surrender to forces beyond control. Ryokan crouched beside him at last. Though Hiroto scarcely noticed, the master's gaze was a study in patience, unflinching yet infinitely kind. "Do you feel it?" Ryokan asked. "The mountain does not move for you. It will not yield to your fear, nor to your striving. It simply is, and in the presence of what is, you must find your own stillness." Hiroto nodded, though words felt insufficient. He realized that this mountain, these echoes of stone and wind, were more than geography. They were mirrors. Every gust was a memory of panic, every cliff a reflection of his inner precipice. He had spent years believing mastery came from motion, from speed, from force. Yet here, in the absence of all that, he discovered another truth. The warrior's strength is born in silence, not in action, in endurance, not in conquest. The hours stretched into twilight, and Hiroto felt exhaustion seep into his bones. His muscles ached, his spirit trembled under the weight of presence, yet something deeper anchored him. Fear was no longer a tyrant. It was a guide, revealing fractures in his mind he had long ignored. Ryokan's earlier words echoed in him. "Stillness is not the absence of fear. It is the discipline of meeting it without running." In those words, Hiroto recognized the framework of a new kind of mastery, one that began within night, fell abruptly, the mist curling like smoke around the peaks. Hiroto's breaths, once shallow and chaotic, deepened, aligning with the rhythm of the mountain itself. He sensed the pulse of life all around, the creak of ancient trees, the whisper of unseen rivers, the low hum of the wind carrying secrets through the stone. Each sound, once a distraction, now became a teacher. He inhaled, he exhaled, and with each cycle, a subtle unraveling of panic, of compulsion, of the restless need to prove himself occurred. Ryokan finally rose and placed a hand on Hiroto's shoulder. "The mountain will continue to test you," he said quietly. "Tomorrow, it will show you even more, if you are willing. But remember this, you are not here to defeat the wind, the cold, or even your fear. You are here to witness them, and through witnessing, to learn that your presence, your calm, grounded presence, is a blade sharper than any sword." Hiroto closed his eyes, feeling the cold seep into his bones, yet unable to shake the warmth growing in his chest. The cliff, the wind, the echoes of every failure and shame he had carried. They were no longer enemies. They were instruments, shaping him in ways that speed and motion never could. He understood now that courage was not in the swing of a blade or the sprint of a foot. It was in the quiet acceptance of reality, in the unshakable stillness that faced chaos and refused to run. The night deepened, and the mountains, stood timeless around him. Hiroto's chest rose and fell in measured cadence, each breath a small triumph, each exhale a release of the weight he had carried for years. He felt the first taste of transformation, presence emerging from panic, clarity emerging from chaos, discipline emerging from suffering. The mountain does not forgive weakness nor reward haste. Only those who can stand, unmoving, unflinching, can hear the echoes of their own true power. Chapter 3. The Silence That Breaks a Man. Part 1. The temple lay cloaked in pre-dawn mist, its wooden beams worn smooth by centuries of rain and wind, yet imbued with a quiet authority that spoke louder than any shout. Hiroto entered without a word, carrying only the shadow of himself, the restless, panicked, striving man he had been. Ryuken followed, silent as the mountains themselves. No training ground awaited him here, no sparring partners, no trials of speed or strength. The master's instruction was simple, unwavering. You will speak no word, perform no task, make no motion beyond what is required for sitting. You will remain with yourself, unbroken and unshielded for 3 days. Hiroto's first moments of enforced silence were deceptively calm. He seated himself in the center of the main hall, cross-legged on the cold wooden floor. The temple smelled of aged pine and incense, subtle, grounding, ancient. At first, the quiet felt empty, almost welcoming. But as minutes stretched into hours, the emptiness grew heavier, pressing against his thoughts like stone. The mind, starved of distraction, began its assault. Memories clawed at him, the mocking eyes of his peers, the relentless pressure to prove his worth, the moments when he had faltered in battle or in life. Each memory was a needle, each thought a hammer, striking at his ego's fragile defenses. By the second day, Hiroto's restlessness had escalated into a full-blown inner storm. His muscles ached from prolonged stillness, his spine burned with fatigue. Yet, it was the mind that raged fiercest. The temple, with all its calm and wisdom, offered no escape. Every creak of wood, every sigh of the wind, became a trigger. He remembered the fear that had paralyzed him in the village dojo, the shame that had driven him to seek Ryokan in the first place. And now, stripped of all distraction, the fear returned. Naked, insistent, relentless, Hiroto's ego screamed in protest. "This is meaningless," it shouted, a voice so loud it seemed to echo off the temple walls. "You are weak. You cannot endure. You are nothing." The mind pulled forth old wounds, a childhood marked by imperfection, parents who demanded excellence, peers who celebrated speed and skill over patience and insight. Every unspoken failure, every hidden shame, rose with sharp teeth and unrelenting ferocity. Yet, Ryokan remained a silent sentinel, watching without interference. The master's presence was a quiet counterpoint to Hiroto's inner tumult, a reminder that the young warrior's struggle was neither novel nor final. Every great fighter, every enlightened mind had walked this path of internal confrontation. The lesson was brutal, yet merciful. One could not flee, fight, or distract oneself from the inner storm. One could only endure it, observe it, and ultimately understand it. By the third day, Hiroto's defenses began to fracture. His body trembled not from external strain, but from the relentless confrontation with himself. And then, in the stillness of the hall, he heard it. Not a roar, not a voice, but a quiet, almost childlike whisper. Fear spoke in this voice, softer, intimate, revealing a truth Hiroto had long avoided. It was not an external force, not an enemy to defeat, but a scar left from neglect, past pain, and unresolved loss. He felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. Though no one would see them, for the first time, Hiroto allowed himself to sit with his fear rather than resist it. He felt its shape, its texture, its rhythm within him. He no longer tried to flee. He no longer sought distraction. He simply witnessed. Ryokan's words, when they finally came, were not loud, not dramatic. When silence breaks you, he said softly, it is only carving space for a stronger spirit. The fractures you feel are not weakness. They are openings through which true presence can enter. Hiroto exhaled, and in that exhale, the weight of years of restless striving, of avoidance and panic, began to loosen. The mind, at last, allowed a small window of clarity. He felt the first glimmer of light in the cavern of his own psyche, the possibility that courage was not in action or conquest, but in patient observation of one's own depths. The silence does not spare you. It strips you, reveals you, and in doing so, offers the first taste of freedom. Chapter 3, Part 2. Night fell over the temple, dense and absolute, yet Hiroto did not sleep. The body, exhausted from hours of stillness, demanded rest, but the mind refused. Thoughts spiraled endlessly. Failures, regrets, imagined futures, where he faltered again. The silence amplified each one, giving them weight, texture, and presence. He could no longer hide behind motion, noise, or the clatter of swords. Here, stripped of distraction, every fear, every memory, every fragment of shame demanded acknowledgement. And then, as the darkness deepened, Hiroto noticed a shift. The whisper of fear, once sharp, accusatory, unbearable, began to soften. It became a voice of inquiry rather than attack. Why do you resist me? What are you hiding? The recognition was startling. Fear was not merely an adversary. It was a teacher, revealing the corners of the self Hiroto had long ignored. With each conscious breath, he allowed the whisper to exist, to speak, to be heard. In doing so, he discovered a strange liberation. The temple, silent and watchful, seemed to pulse with life. The slow creak of beams settling, the faint murmur of distant rivers, the subtle exhalations of wind through the pines. Hiroto tuned in, matching each inhalation and exhalation with the rhythm of the world around him. His ego, once loud and insistent, began to quiet. The need to prove, to act, to perform, melted into presence. Pain, shame, and fear were no longer chains. They were textures in a vast landscape he had only now begun to explore. Ryokan spoke finally, as the first pale light of dawn filtered through the temple's lattice windows. You have been broken, he said. But breaking is not death. Breaking is the creation of space. A hollow, carved in which strength can grow. You have met your fear and allowed it to speak. That is more than courage. It is presence. The warrior's path is not forged in defeating fear, but in sitting with it, unshakable and attentive. Hiroto opened his eyes, feeling the quiet spread through his body like water settling in a vessel. He was lighter, not in muscle or skill, but in spirit. The restless tension, the invisible tightening that had haunted him since childhood had loosened. He understood now that all his previous training, all his frantic motion and effort had been preparation, not for battle with others, but for this confrontation with himself. He had been a man who ran from fear, yet in stillness he had learned to remain. The temple walls, weathered by centuries, seemed to exhale with him, as though recognizing the transformation that had begun. Hiroto realized that silence could be both a crucible and a sanctuary. In the absence of action, the mind became visible, raw, and unshielded, and only by facing it without flinching could one step closer to mastery. Ryokan's gaze softened, and he placed a hand briefly on Hiroto's shoulder. "You have begun to hear the voice of the self," he said. "Now you must learn to carry it beyond these walls. Silence is only the beginning. The mountain, the wind, the world, they will test you next, and then you will see whether the lessons of presence can endure when confronted by chaos." Hiroto inhaled deeply, feeling the calm settle into his bones. He had survived the silence, endured the confrontation with his own ego, and emerged with a newfound clarity. The fear had not vanished. It could not. But he had learned to sit with it, to observe it, and in doing so, he had glimpsed the first true form of strength: unshakable stillness. Silence breaks the man, but in that break, it shapes the spirit into something greater, something enduring. Chapter 4: The Sword That Does Not Move. Part 1. The morning sun spilled gold across the temple courtyard, painting the worn stones in hues of fire and shadow. Hiroto's muscles ached from the prolonged stillness of the previous days, yet the pain was different now, tempered with awareness, a signal of growth rather than a mark of weakness. Ryokan awaited him, wooden sword in hand, the simple tool heavy with centuries of purpose and presence. There was no challenge laid before him, no duel, no test of speed or strength, only the quiet, insistent demand of stillness in motion. "Hold it," Ryokan instructed, placing the sword in Hiroto's hands. "Do not strike, do not swing. Simply hold, breathe, observe, become the blade without moving." Hiroto gripped the weapon, its weight unfamiliar yet grounding hours stretched ahead, endless as the mountain paths. His arms quivered under the strain, shoulders screaming in silent protest. The temptation to release, to swing, to move, with the training ingrained in every fiber of his being, was overwhelming. Yet Ryokan's eyes held him fast, unwavering. There was no shouting, no correction, only the patient insistence that mastery begins in restraint, in quiet endurance, in the deliberate act of choosing stillness over action. Time dissolved into a sequence of breaths. Hiroto felt every muscle, every tendon, every nerve protest, and then settle, as if the sword had become an extension of his own body. His heart raced, then slowed. The mind, once frantic with striving, began to align with the rhythm of his chest, the weight of the weapon, and the immensity of the mountain beyond the temple walls. Pain was no longer a signal to retreat. It became a teacher, guiding awareness into each trembling joint, each quivering limb. Ryokan's voice, calm as the morning mist, cut through the torrent of discomfort. "Discipline is not in spectacle. It is in repetition without ego. in choice repeated until choice itself dissolves. The blade is immovable when the mind is still. Speed follows stillness, not the other way around. A fast hand without a calm mind cuts blindly. A still hand strikes with clarity. Hiroto inhaled and exhaled with precision, feeling the shift begin. His grip, once tense and desperate, softened. His gaze, once scattered and anxious, focused. His awareness, once fragmented, began to coalesce. The sword was no longer an external object. It was a continuation of presence itself. Every subtle tremor of the weapon became a dialogue, a reflection of his inner state. As he held, he sensed the quiet transformation taking place. His breath deepened, his heart steadied, his mind sharpened, and a calm vigilance replaced the old frenzy hours merged into one another, pain and fatigue transforming into meditation in motion. Hiroto understood, with growing clarity, that mastery did not lie in conquering others, nor in the speed of the hand, nor in the visible display of skill. It lay in stillness, the immovable blade, the unshakable presence, the deliberate patience. These were the weapons the world could not take from him. Ryokan stepped back, silent, yet the lesson was complete in its simplicity and rigor. The sword is no longer just wood. It is you. Let every motion, when it comes, be born from this stillness. Only then does the warrior act with true precision, true clarity, true power. Hiroto lowered the weapon slowly, feeling the weight of presence settle into his shoulders, his chest, his spine. The world beyond the temple seemed sharper, quieter, and infinitely more vast. He realized the first tangible change in himself. Fear no longer dictated his reflexes. The tremors of ego had begun to subside, replaced by the patient discipline of choice and observation. To wield the sword is to first become still. To move with clarity is to let stillness guide the hand. Chapter 4, Part 2. The sun climbed higher, and Hiroto's arms burned with a quiet, insistent ache. Hours had passed, yet the wooden sword remained steady in his hands. Each second was a confrontation, not with an enemy, but with himself, his impulses, his impatience, his habit of seeking immediate results, the urge to strike, to release, to prove himself through motion, rose again and again. But Hiroto met each wave with measured breath, awareness, and deliberate stillness. Ryokan watched from a distance, his eyes serene yet penetrating. The immovable blade is not a lesson in strength, he said softly, but in persistence, in choosing presence over compulsion. Your muscles, your mind, your spirit, they are all instruments. The first strike of mastery is not delivered with force, but with unwavering attention. Stillness teaches more than motion ever can. Hiroto's body began to synchronize with his mind. Pain was no longer an enemy. It was a guide. Fatigue was no longer a limit. It was a measure of endurance. The sword became a conduit, linking breath to muscle, mind to motion. Every subtle tremor was a message. Attend, observe, remain. With each passing moment, he discovered that discipline was not a single act, but a continuum. A practice repeated until instinct itself became presence. The wind whispered through the courtyard, carrying the scent of pine and earth. Hiroto felt the subtle shift within himself, the pulse of awareness expanding beyond the confines of his body. His gaze sharpened, His reaction slowed but deepened, his entire being attuned to the subtle currents of the world around him. The sword, once a mere weapon, now mirrored his state. Calm, yet alert. Heavy, yet supple. Motionless, yet ready. Ryokan finally approached, placing a hand lightly on the young warrior's shoulder. Mastery begins when movement is born from stillness, not fear, he said. The blade follows the mind that is free of panic, the hand that is guided by clarity. You have held the immovable sword long enough to understand this truth. Tomorrow, you will see how stillness informs action, beyond the temple, beyond the mountain. Hiroto lowered the weapon slowly, feeling the profound simplicity of the lesson. He understood now that all his frantic striving, all his attempts to overcome fear through motion alone, had been incomplete. True mastery required patience, endurance, and the willingness to endure discomfort without fleeing the body, the mind, and the spirit. All must align in quiet harmony before action can carry meaning. As the shadows lengthened and the courtyard grew cool, Hiroto closed his eyes and inhaled deeply. The tremors in his arms remained, but the turmoil in his chest had begun to settle. Presence was no longer an abstract concept. It was tangible, living in the tension of his muscles, the rhythm of his breath, the weight of the sword in his hands. The mountain and the master had shown him that discipline is forged in repetition, patience, and stillness. Long before it is revealed in speed or strength, the warrior's hand strikes true only when born from the immovable heart. Chapter 5. The night the spirit stood alone. Part 1. Night fell like a velvet curtain over the mountain forest. The air was thick with the scent of damp pine, and shadows pooled between the gnarled trunks, hiding secrets and whispers of the past. Ryokan approached Hiroto with no words, handing him a small satchel of provisions and pointing toward the dense forest below. Tonight, he said, you will walk alone. No light, no weapons, no guidance, only presence. Hiroto's heart tightened at the simplicity and severity of the instruction. Every instinct screamed for preparation, for defense, for the familiar motion of training and mastery. Yet Ryokan's eyes, calm and unwavering, offered no compromise. Fear, long a companion in Hiroto's life, rose immediately, visible now as a shadow stretching across his mind. What if I fall? What if I cannot find my way? What if the darkness devours me? He descended into the forest, each step muffled by fallen needles and moss. The night was absolute. The stars were hidden behind a veil of clouds, the moon absent from the sky. Every sound, a branch snapping, the rustle of leaves, the distant cry of an animal, became magnified, a trigger for the old panic that had once gripped his chest in the dojo. His muscles tensed, ready for combat that would never come, ready to flee into paths that were unknown and treacherous. But he remembered Ryokan's lessons. Stillness is not the absence of fear, and mastery is born not from motion, but from presence. Hiroto inhaled deliberately, letting the cold night air fill his lungs, and exhaled slowly, releasing the instinct to run. The shadows remained, the sounds remained, yet within him, something shifted. The trembling of panic began to soften, replaced by the deliberate awareness of his own body and mind. The forest became a teacher, not a threat, and each breath a bridge from fear to observation. Hours passed, Hiroto's eyes adjusted to the darkness, learning to perceive the subtle shades of night and the gentle movement of leaves. His ears became attuned to the rhythm of the forest, the pulse of insects, the whisper of wind, the distant rush of water. And as he moved silently among the trees, he began to recognize the echoes of his own mind mirrored in the external world. Shadows that once had seemed threatening were now textures. Sounds that once had screamed danger became patterns to observe. The forest no longer demanded flight, it demanded presence. Hiroto sank to the ground beside a fallen log, crossing his legs and closing his eyes. Every memory of failure, every pang of past fear rose within him, yet he met them with measured breath, observing rather than resisting. For the first time, he was alone with himself, and fear did not dictate the motion of his body. A chill brushed his cheek, the night pressing in, yet Hiroto remained rooted. He realized something profound. The power he had sought in speed, in strikes, in motion, was already within him. It had always been there, dormant, waiting for the courage to simply be present. He inhaled, exhaled, and felt the pulse of life, not as threat, but as rhythm. Fear is not conquered in motion, it is faced and allowed to exist. And in that stillness, the spirit stands alone and unshakable. Chapter 5. Part 2. The forest deepened around Hiroto, shadows growing longer and more intricate. Yet his awareness expanded with each heartbeat. Every crack of a twig, every rustle of unseen animals became a note in the symphony of presence. His breath remained steady, each inhale and exhale deliberate, each movement slow, intentional, attuned to the rhythm of the earth beneath him. For the first time, he was no longer reacting to fear. He was observing it, listening to it, allowing it to exist without giving it command. Hours blurred into a seamless meditation in darkness. Memory after memory rose unbidden. The dojo's mocking gaze, the failures in front of peers, the restless nights that had once gripped him, yet now, stripped of distraction, Hiroto felt a strange freedom. The terror that had once suffocated him no longer demanded flight. The shadows, the sounds, the unknown, all were mirrors reflecting his inner state. And he discovered that in the absence of swords, light, or external validation, courage could exist quietly, rooted in awareness. The forest whispered secrets that Hiroto had never noticed before. The subtle pattern of wind through pine needles, the faint trickle of a hidden stream, the rhythm of distant wings slicing through darkness. Each sound, once alarming, now offered lessons in patience, in attention, in the deep interconnection of life and self. He felt the pulse of the world around him merge with the pulse within him. Presence became both shield and sword, clarity replacing panic, and stillness replacing chaos. As dawn approached, pale light seeped through the dense canopy, revealing the forest in a soft glow. Hiroto remained seated, unmoving, yet profoundly transformed. The night had been a crucible, stripping away reliance on motion, tools, or certainty. What remained was something far deeper. The understanding that true mastery arises from stillness, and that fear is not an enemy, but a companion to be met with courage and awareness. Ryokan arrived silently, at first light, his eyes scanning Hiroto, like one surveying a field that had been reshaped by time and effort. He said nothing, yet his presence conveyed recognition, approval, and calm. Hiroto stood, sensing a shift within himself that no previous training or village accolade had ever achieved. He was grounded, present, unshakable. The forest had accepted him as an ally, rather than a threat. The night had revealed what no sword could teach, that the spirit, when trained to remain still in the face of fear, becomes its own source of power. The master finally spoke, his voice soft but commanding. "You have walked the night alone, Hiroto, yet you are not alone. You have learned that presence is a shield, fear is a teacher, and the spirit, when unmoving, can endure all. Remember this lesson: strength is not in the motion of your hands, nor the swiftness of your steps. It is in the unshakable stillness that governs both." Hiroto inhaled deeply, letting the cool morning air fill his lungs. He exhaled, releasing the residue of panic and restlessness that had clung to him for years. For the first time, he felt the steady rhythm of a fearless mind, anchored not in action but in conscious presence. The night is a crucible. Fear may circle endlessly, but the spirit that stands still emerges unshakable, ready for the trials yet to come. Chapter 6: The Path That Moves Forward. Part 1. The village lay quiet beneath the early morning sun, smoke curling lazily from chimneys, the distant sound of water flowing through the rice paddies. Hiroto returned, not as the restless youth who had fled in panic, but as a man whose presence carried the weight of mountains and the quiet authority of stillness. His footsteps were measured, deliberate, yet unforced. The villagers paused briefly, sensing the change, not in his speed nor his skill, but in the calm radiating from his very being. He passed the familiar streets, noting the challenges, the distractions, the voices that had once provoked anxiety or doubt. But now, none of it unsettled him. He observed insults, skepticism, even the occasional provocation with an evenness of mind that was startling, even to himself. Where once he would have reacted, flinched, or sought validation, he now simply moved through the world with presence as his armor. Every breath, every step, every glance was deliberate, rooted in awareness rather than reaction. Children followed at a distance, sensing the aura of a man transformed, curious but respectful. Hiroto paused briefly, squatting to their level, and in a wordless gesture offered attention and acknowledgement. He realized the subtle influence of quiet strength. It inspires more profoundly than force, more enduringly than display. Even the elders, once skeptical of his restless striving, noticed a change in the balance of his energy. Hiroto's mastery was not loud. It was gravitational, drawing respect and calm without effort. Ryokan's teachings resonated in every action. The stillness that had carried him through mountains, nights alone, and the crucible of silence now permeated his approach to life. His breath remained steady, his gaze calm, and the pulse of his presence informed every movement. He understood now that mastery is not a display to impress others, but a cultivation of inner clarity that becomes visible through action. The village itself, once a stage of fear and competition, became a landscape where his presence could speak louder than any sword. Hiroto engaged in training with the young warriors of the village, but differently than before, he did not push, command, or compete. Instead, he embodied calm authority. guiding through demonstration rather than force. Students who once struggled under pressure now flourished in the example of steady focus. Words were minimal. The weight of presence communicated what no lecture could. In this, Hiroto glimpsed the final lesson Ryokan had instilled. The true warrior does not conquer others. He conquers himself, and in doing so, awakens courage and clarity in all who witness him. Challenges arose, mockery from peers, tests of skill from skeptical elders, moments designed to provoke fear. But Hiroto met each one with unshakable composure. The familiar tightening in his chest appeared briefly, only to dissolve as he centered himself, inhaling, exhaling, allowing stillness to govern every response. Where once panic would have dictated action, now conscious presence guided his hand, his words, his gaze. The warrior does not seek victory over others, but mastery of self. The path moves forward not through conquest, but through presence. Chapter 6, Part 2. The sun rose higher, illuminating the village with a clarity that mirrored Hiroto's own inner state. The familiar streets, once chaotic and anxiety-laden, now seemed like a canvas for his presence. Every interaction, every glance, every movement became an expression of the lessons learned in the mountains and the forests. He did not boast, he did not strike, yet the weight of calm authority followed him like an unspoken rhythm, guiding the people around him. Hiroto trained alongside the villagers, not to dominate, but to teach through example. His motions were slow, precise, infused with the depth of awareness cultivated over months of silence, stillness, and confrontation with fear. Each student, each onlooker, absorbed the lesson without realizing it. Strength does not shout, it radiates. Courage is not a display of speed or force, but the steady refusal to be ruled by fear. Even the most restless youth began to understand this truth by witnessing the quiet power of a single man. Grounded in the mastery of self, word of Hiroto's transformation spread through the village, yet he remained unconcerned with reputation. He moved with purpose, spoke only when necessary, and carried an unshakable patience. Arguments that once escalated into chaos now dissipated in his presence. Insults and provocation lost their potency. Absorbed by the calm field of awareness he projected, Hiroto understood fully Ryokan's final teaching. A fearless mind is born not in battle, but in the space between breaths, in the stillness that precedes action. By evening, Hiroto found himself atop a small hill overlooking the village. The wind moved gently, brushing his face with the scent of rice fields and distant pine. He closed his eyes, feeling the pulse of his own presence, the rhythm of the world around him, the deep clarity that came from having met fear and welcomed it as teacher. For the first time, mastery did not feel like striving. It felt like being. The restless, frantic warrior of the past was gone, replaced by a man who understood that true strength arises from quiet vigilance, deliberate breath, and unwavering presence. The mountains, forests, nights of silence, the immovable sword, the darkness of fear, they had all led him here. Hiroto opened his eyes, calm and steady, observing the village and its people, not as challenges to overcome, but as life to witness, to nurture, and to move through with awareness. The path forward stretched endlessly, unhurried, demanding patience, discipline, and presence. But Hiroto now walked it without fear. The warrior is reborn, not in battle, but in the mastery of self. And from this stillness, the path of life moves forward, guided by a fearless mind and an unshakable spirit. Now, take a moment. Reflect on your own stillness. If this journey resonated with you, let the world know. Share your thoughts below. Every like, every comment, every share is a ripple of presence, a commitment to mastery beyond the screen. And if you're ready to walk further on this path, join us. Subscribe and step into the space between breaths, where strength is born. Your next moment of courage begins with one click.